We're going to take a look at 10 Frank Vogel replacements, but first, this is why you subscribe to the channel, as we cook up the latest Lakers offseason news and rumors, as well as NBA free agency updates. This is really your one-stop shop for all of the developments throughout the NBA offseason pertaining to the Los Angeles Lakers when there are trade rumors that surface. We also have you covered on that front, and we like to interact with the audience and all of our loyal subscribers through mailbags, where we allow you to ask us questions. So make sure you join the Laker Nation family here at Chat Sports and join the family of more than 42,000 subs by hitting that red subscribe button down below. Welcome into the Lakers Report by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Senior, and according to Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, looks as though Frank Vogel is going to get fired after the season as the Lakers miss out on the playoffs. So coming your way on today's show, we're going to take a look at my top 10 Frank Vogel replacements. But first, I want to ask you a trivia question, and I will unveil the answer later on today's show. Who did the Lakers draft twice in their franchise's history? Was it Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Magic Johnson, Kobe Bryant? Four greats in this franchise. Get those answers to this trivia question in, and I'll give you the answer later on today's show. We start off this list of Frank Vogel replacements with Kenny Atkinson coming in at number 10. Assistant coach for the Golden State Warriors. He really made the Brooklyn Nets a respectable franchise. He then has been able to really learn the modern-day NBA and tinker with his offensive style with a very good culture in Golden State. I'd like him as a Frank Vogel replacement, and I love what he did with the Brooklyn Nets. He's coming in at number 10. At number 9, it's a guy who used to be on the bench for Los Angeles, the current head coach for the Dallas Mavericks, Jason Kidd. I think that what he's done in Dallas this year is terrific. And if only Kidd was still in Los Angeles, if that was the case and he was still on the bench for Frank Vogel, I think he'd be able to take over for Vogel and be a very viable candidate to do so. He has the respect of this locker room, especially LeBron James, and I love the adjustments that he's made from once being the coach of the Brooklyn Nets, as well as the Milwaukee Bucks. He gets fired. He's with Los Angeles. He was able to change up his style, take a seat back, and I think that was really valuable for him. But why would Jason Kidd leave his current job in the Dallas Mavericks, leave a great player in Luka Doncic, who's much younger than LeBron James? He's done a great job this year in Dallas. I think he deserves more Coach of the Year buzz, one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, and I really like their offensive style as well. Jason Kidd has to be a top 10 candidate. Now, who do you want as the next Lakers head coach to take over for Frank Vogel? I want to hear from you in the comment section and get some of those names in there because I want to see what you have to come up with in your head coaching search. Interested to hear what you all have to say. It'll be the pinned comment on today's video. So if you get hit with that YouTube ad break, just scroll on down and get your votes in. Another familiar face, Mark Jackson, former head coach of the Golden State Warriors, game analyst right now for ESPN, and he's been tied to so many head coaching openings over the last several years. He's never been able to make it back into the NBA ranks as a head coach. You take a look at his head coaching resume, he did some good things with Golden State before Steve Kerr got there. They got close, but then Steve Kerr able to push them over the top and win 3 NBA championships, missed the playoffs his first year. The second year lost in the Western Conference semifinals. Then Golden State decided to let him go and go after Steve Kerr after they lost in the first round in 2013-14. Those latter 2 years, 47-51 wins, nothing to scoff at. At number 7, a current assistant on Frank Vogel's staff, a guy who's worked with Kobe Bryant as his trainer. He's currently an assistant coach with Los Angeles. That is Phil Handy. He's LeBron's trusted assistant now. LeBron James really likes him. So when you have the ear of the best player and one of the greatest players in the history of the NBA, those inroads help you potentially land a head coaching job. Been an assistant on the Lakers staff going back to 2019. As a personal trainer back in the day, he was able to train, coach, develop some of the best talents that we've seen in modern NBA history. Because of that, has some gusto about him, does have that aforementioned experience. This would really be a big swing that could miss, but a name I wouldn't hate becoming a head coach soon in the NBA. Today's show presented to you by the fine folks at Rumble. really excited about our partnership with Rumble, and we have some work to do catching up the Golden State Warriors today. Now, you can find some exclusive content on the Rumble app if you go to rumble.com/LakersTV, but we're trying to catch Golden State Warriors today, north of 1,000 subs. Lakers report approaching 900. LeBron James is the better player all time as compared to Steph Curry, so let's basically do that same thing and overtake Warriors today with our Lakers report subscribers. Just plug in that link down below. Also on Rumble, free and uncensored content, sports news, politics, tech, and business. We continue to grow to the platforms that you as the viewers use, so give us a follow and subscribe, rumble.com/LakersTV. To number 6 on our list, Dwayne Casey, former head coach of the Toronto Raptors, now the head coach of the Detroit Pistons, has a lot of experience as a head coach, and because of that, very respected in league circles. With the Minnesota Timberwolves, 53-69 from 2005 to 2007. With the Toronto Raptors, they were great, but really LeBron James was in their nightmares because with the Cleveland Cavaliers, they can never get past him in the NBA playoffs. With some of those really good teams with DeMar DeRozan as well as Kyle Lowry, won a lot of games. 320 wins from 2011 to 2018, and then the Detroit Pistons. It's hard really to judge him on this Pistons stint because while he's been there and ever since he's been there, they have been in this rebuilding process. But right now, I like the Pistons as one of the next breakout teams in the NBA. How do you leave Cade Cunningham for the unknown in Los Angeles? Might be tough for Dwayne Casey, but the logo and the image and the brand power of Los Angeles as compared to Detroit, you know who we're taking in that argument. Number 5, Sam Cassell, the lead assistant on Doc Rivers' staff in Philadelphia. Sam Cassell has been a Sixers assistant coach going all the way back to 2020, so he came to Philadelphia from Los Angeles with Doc Rivers. 13 years on an NBA coaching staff after a long and successful NBA career, namely with the Milwaukee Bucks. Hasn't been a head coach before, but he has really helped in Philadelphia the development of Tyrese Maxey. And because of that, I get attracted to coaches who, of course, have the X's and O's down. Maybe they have some type of playing and coaching experience. Development of players, though, especially among young players. That's something we haven't been able to see with Los Angeles. And maybe ownership goes to LeBron and they say, look, we need to bring some youthful talent into this organization. Sam Cassell has proven that he can develop some of that young talent. I like him as another candidate. Your confidence level in the front office to make the right hire is where? I want you to scale it for me from 1 to 10. A lot of fans, they have issues with this front office. Do you have confidence that they can make the right hire in exchange for Frank Vogel? Scale it for me from 1 to 10. We move ahead and pivot to number 4 on this list, Terry Stotts, former head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers. And like some of the other coaches on this list, won a bunch of games throughout his head coaching tenure and has a bunch of head coaching experience. Second in team history with Portland for the most wins. And yes, at times that franchise has been down, but 402 wins, that's impressive. First pick was Stotts as head coach, Damian Lillard. How has that worked out? Dame's been one of the best players in the NBA over the last decade. 8 playoff appearances in 9 years. Consistent winner. Only made the conference finals once back in 2019. Golden State dominated them. Portland never made it to the NBA finals. But what are you looking for in a head coach? Not just with Los Angeles, but anywhere. Consistency. A lot of wins. Consistent playoff appearances. Terry Stotts, he's been able to do that. But I'm somewhat lukewarm on him for a couple of reasons. No deep playoff appearances outside of 1 year. And in a pressure-packed city, among this pressure-packed fan base like Los Angeles, does Terry Stotts really move the needle as compared to a lot of the candidates on this list? My answer to that question would be no, he doesn't move the needle for me, and I think there are better head coaches out there as compared to Terry Stotts. Now, earlier, I had thrown out that trivia question. Now it's time to unveil the answer to that trivia question. I asked for you to get your votes in. Hopefully you went with EB because the answer to that trivia question, Elgin Baylor, drafted twice by Los Angeles. You're like, Chase, how? Here you go. Lakers drafted Elgin Baylor in the 14th round of the 1956 NBA draft, but Baylor opted to stay in school, kind of like Major League Baseball. After leading Seattle University now known as the Red Hawks, to the NCAA Tournament Championship game in 1958. Baylor was drafted again by the Lakers, this time with the number 1 overall pick in the 1958 NBA draft, and as we know, the rest is history. How about that player development story? 14th round to the number 1 overall pick? Good stuff right there, and this is why you subscribe to the channel. We inform you, we entertain you, we bring you trivia questions, also the latest news and rumors, and we like to interact with all of our loyal subscribers. Speaking of our loyal subscribers, shout out to some recent ones right here. Abby, hopefully I pronounced that name right, Abby Aguilar, Kelvin Davis, Val Medine, Zosimo Santos, and Carlos. Thank you so much for subscribing to the Lakers Report, and if you haven't subscribed, you ain't alive. YouTube.com/LakersTV, or hit that red subscribe button down below. 3 more coaching candidates to get to replace Frank Vogel, Doc Rivers at number 3. We've talked a lot about Doc Rivers over the last couple of weeks and days here on the Lakers Report because according to Jake Fisher, Doc is a leading candidate in addition to Quinn Snyder for taking over as Frank Vogel. The only problem with hiring Doc Rivers, he's currently under contract with the Philadelphia 76ers in year 2 of a 5-year deal that pays him about $8 million per year. Here's the deal though. He was not hired by current basketball operations runner in Daryl Morey in Philadelphia, and because of that, if the Sixers flame out early in the NBA playoffs, first or second round, I could see Daryl Morey going another route and firing Doc Rivers, making him available for Los Angeles to hire. Doc's coaching stints. He did some great work with the Orlando Magic, helping them through that rebuild from 1999 to 2004. He was then hired by the Boston Celtics. The early days were a disaster as they were rebuilding as well, but then that rebuild was fast-tracked when the Celtics beat the Lakers in the NBA Finals, led by Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, as well as Ray Allen. Overall record, 416-305. He then goes to the Clippers after his tenure somewhat fizzled out and things got stale in Boston, goes to Los Angeles, and we know some of the playoff shortcomings there, and there have been playoff shortcomings with the Philadelphia 76ers in a year plus, and we'll see what happens this year. The pros and cons of hiring Doc Rivers if you're Los Angeles. He wins a lot of games. He's done a great job of developing young players, especially guards, because that was his forte and his position at the NBA level. He's respected by peers and players. I thought the other day when George Niang said, when bench players see other players flourish on this roster, we get pumped up for those players. That doesn't happen elsewhere. That goes to show you the culture that Doc Rivers has been able to build. The cons, though, they're certainly there, and there's some baggage there with Doc Rivers. Lack of in-game adjustments, it can be criminal. I don't agree with some of the substitution patterns, and the blown leads are certainly troublesome. I think his team sometimes lack mental fortitude, and because of that, Doc Rivers is kind of on the hot seat in Philadelphia if they don't make a deep run in the NBA playoffs. So those are the pros and cons with Doc Rivers. 2 more coaching candidates to get to. David Fizdale at number 2, currently an assistant on this Los Angeles Lakers staff, and going back to when he was an assistant on Eric Spoelstra's staff in Miami, he has ties with LeBron James from his time in Miami. Now, LeBron was certainly outspoken when David Fizdale got fired in New York. He was also let go by the Memphis Grizzlies after being an assistant on Eric Spoelstra's staff in Miami, but is this kind of a Jason Kidd situation where he had a couple of head coaching opportunities, then he becomes an assistant for a little while? Does he learn from his past failures? And also, wasn't an ideal situation in New York. Some might make the argument that he was run out of town before he had a chance to really instill a rebuilding culture in New York. But you take a look at his head coaching tenure with the Memphis Grizzlies, 2016-17, they lost in the first round. Fired mid-season the following year during that 2017-18 season. He gets hired by the New York Knicks, then fired after only 2 seasons in New York. Missed the playoffs the first year, 17-65. It's a really, really hard organization to coach for because the ownership situation is an absolute disaster. But LeBron James has always liked him. So if the Lakers still want to hear from LeBron James and he goes to the front office and he goes to management and he says, you know what, I think David Fizdale is the best coach, then maybe Fizdale has an opportunity. The much-awaited number 1 spot, I'm going with Quinn Snyder. There's been some buzz, there's been some reports and rumors around Quinn Snyder and Los Angeles' interest in him. I think what he's done with the Utah Jazz for a long time has been really, really impressive. 8 years, almost a 59% winning percentage. They've won almost 400 games. The Jazz have made the last 5 playoffs. Now, they failed to make it out of the second round in each of those 5 playoff stints, but still, they've come close to at least sniffing the Western Conference Finals. Success in a smaller NBA market is certainly attractive for me. 19-26 record in the playoffs, but I think he's been able to maximize the talent on that roster and in that small market. Hasn't reached the conference finals, but I don't hold that against Quinn Snyder. I think his temperament would be really good for this pressure-packed media market that is Los Angeles. With this iconic brand, he would be atop my list among the top 10 candidates to replace Frank Vogel. I think he has it all. X's and O's, in-game adjustments, player development, history with making it to the playoffs consistently. And I like his temperament and his attitude and a little bit of a swagger that he'd be able to bring to that Los Angeles sideline. So these are my top 10 candidates to replace Frank Vogel if and when he's fired. Kenny Atkinson, Jason Kidd, Mark Jackson, Phil Handy, Dwayne Casey, Sam Cassell, Terry Stotts, Doc Rivers, David Fizdale, and Quinn Snyder. Who did I miss? You can call me out in the comment section, and that's the beauty of this show and being in America. Freedom of speech in the comment section. Rip me if you want. Praise me if you want. But let me know who I missed among these candidates in the comment section. And thanks so much for watching today's show.